Welcome to Health Focus. I'm Dr. Scott, your host. December is Safe Toys and Gifts Month, as designated by the Consumer Product Safety Commission, or simply Safe Toys Month, as designated by the American Ophthalmology Association. But no matter how we recognize it, this is a time to think about the gifts we give and receive, and to contemplate the health implications for all ages. You know, over 250,000 Americans seek medical care annually for toy-related injuries. About 3/4 of these events involve kids under the age of 15. We're talking here about 19 million individual toys that may be subject to safety recalls annually, in fact, due to concerns about the safety of these toys. This may range from lead exposure risks to choking risks, and many organizations, including the Mayo Clinic and the Prevent Blindness America group, have been concerned about this. In fact, they've tried to publish educational tools regarding this problem. Some people think, for example, that it's wise to inspect toys for sharp or loose parts before purchasing them, and to look for certain labels. One of them that's sometimes cited that we will ask our guest about in a moment is ATSM, standing for American Society for Testing and Materials. Various groups come up with standards for safety of toys, but you know what? I don't know much about this because I'm actually a geriatrician. I mainly treat older people, but we have an excellent guest today, a local medical director and clinician with expertise in this area. Dr. Tami Hendriksz serves as Associate Professor of Medicine and Assistant Dean of Clinical Integration at Vallejo's own Touro University College of Osteopathic Medicine. After earning a Bachelor's of Science degree from UCLA, Dr. Hendriksz earned her Doctor of Osteopathy degree at Touro and currently serves as chairperson of pediatrics at that institution. Dr. Hendriksz has publications in the Journal of the American College of Osteopathic Pediatrics, which is a very distinguished journal. She's participated in many editorial boards and also as a practicing clinician. So it's my pleasure to welcome you, Dr. Hendriksz, to Health Focus.
Thank you.
I wonder if you might begin by just telling us a little bit about your own history and how you got into pediatrics, and what your own career has been about over the years and how you ended up at Touro.
Yeah, I'll give the briefest version of this because the story can get very long. Generally speaking, I've always loved working with children. I've always gotten a lot of pleasure helping children and working with them. Just before medical school, my prior career, I spent 1 year working as a special education teacher, teaching math and science to high school students, and I found that very rewarding. And then I have always been fascinated by science, the physiology of the human body, what we know and what we don't know about the human brain. I find all of it very fascinating. So I feel incredibly lucky that now I get to work in a job as a pediatrician and as a medical educator at a medical school that really combines all of my passions. And so it serves to be an incredibly rewarding career for me.
Well, it sounds like a great balance between both treating patients and educating the next generation of doctors.
Absolutely.
So turning to the subject today of toy safety, do you run into any problems with toy safety in your own practice or teaching the future pediatricians of America?
I absolutely do, yes.
Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, the things that I see most commonly in my practice usually involve small items. So small toys that get lodged in orifices. I pull out a lot of beads out of ears. I see a lot of children who have ingested certain toys or accidentally inhaled certain toys. Most recently, I saw a child whose parents were very excited. They got their 6-month-old one of those ride-on toys that has the wheels, so it looked like a fire truck, and they're excited to put him on it. And they put him on it, and he just wasn't quite developmentally ready to ride on that toy by himself, so he ended up falling off of it.
You know, it's funny you should mention choking hazards because actually in preparing for the show, I came up with a few small toys that maybe we could zoom in on that basically are out of a friend's toy chest. And as you can see, these are really kind of small buttons, beads, a little figurine. I know it's a little hard to see on the camera, but is this the kind of thing that a child might get into trouble with?
Absolutely.
Could you comment on that?
Yeah, I'm going to show this figurine in particular, if I can. because this figurine actually comes apart. So that's one of the things that you want to watch for when you're looking at toys, is sometimes the toy itself may be large, and so you think it's not going to pose a risk, but you can actually take off different pieces, and then suddenly these pieces become much more risky. One of the things that I educate both my students and my patients' parents about is if you have a kid that is a toddler or younger, one nice easy trick to see if a toy is going to be safe for them is to get the tube of a toilet paper roll. That tube, if a toy can fit inside that tube or can pass through that tube, it is too small for your toddler or infant. If the toy can't fit inside that tube, then you know it's probably not going to be a choking hazard.
Dr. Hendriksz, in your experience, is the public very well informed on this issue?
Not well enough. I think there are some topics that do come up fairly frequently and others that just get missed completely.
And of course, we mentioned the major issue with choking. I understand that also you could run into problems with choking, for example, with small batteries.
Absolutely. The batteries that we're most concerned about are those button batteries. So I know in my household, anytime we get something that turns out to have a button battery, oftentimes they're found in cameras, they're found in remote controls. There are some toys that have button batteries. Button batteries, the larger button batteries, certainly can serve as choking items. Even the smaller button batteries, if they're placed up against the surface of skin, they are so incredibly caustic they can cause chemical burns. So we've seen button batteries actually burn holes through kids' esophaguses, in their ears, in their nose.
So when we're talking about batteries, Dr. Hendriksz, it's not just a matter of a potential choking hazard or an obstruction maybe to the gastrointestinal tract, but also there's toxicity involved in the actual substance of the battery.
Absolutely.
So they're really a problem with smaller kids. And with this choking hazard issue and with battery ingestions and so forth, is there an age at which you begin to worry a little less about that?
You can go based on age, but I prefer to go based on the developmental level of the child, because some children, even at age 5 or 6, they may still be exploring the world with their mouth, and so they still may be at risk for smaller items or batteries. So I prefer to go based on the child's maturity.
Excellent. And you know, we also sometimes see very tragic cases in which a child may get wrapped up in a cord from perhaps Venetian blinds or some kind of a gift, or even a toy like tether balls or a toy that comes with a cord. Mm-hmm. So perhaps you can address that as an area of safety for smaller children particularly.
Yeah, strangulation issues are certainly a concern with any toy that comes with a cord. And that could be a net from a basketball hoop or a goal post, or as you said, a tether board, or it could be one of those toys, the pull-along toys that kids will use, or even a string on a toy guitar. My general rule of thumb is to make sure that those cords are no longer than 7 inches. It is difficult to strangle yourself, even for a small child, on a cord that's longer than, or that's shorter than 7 inches.
Right, and of course it's worth pointing out that when you're talking about cords, in the case of electrical cords, there's also a risk of an electrical injury, some of which could be quite devastating to the face and the mouth.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so it's more than just strangulation. And when a strangulation occurs, of course, you know, it's very tragic. Hopefully you can call 911 and address that before the child perishes, but you know, we don't want to see that kind of tragedy. So be very cautious about cords. I think that's something we can agree on. Now, how about balloons? I know that in some of the literature I looked at in preparing for this show, there's a concern that many small kids who get balloons, it seems so innocuous, can get into trouble with balloons.
Absolutely. If a balloon is blown up nice and big, that can be something really fun and safe to play with. It's when a balloon is deflated or when a balloon is popped, and a child can pick up either the deflated balloon or the small balloon pieces, and those become a choking hazard.
Okay. And still, if you have older kids, you're going to have balloons at so many parties, so I guess it's a matter of supervision.
Always.
Okay. If you're just joining us, our guest is Dr. Tami Hendriksz of Touro University, a pediatrician and an expert in this subject, and we're talking about toy safety and some issues that might be helpful to our viewers. And I would just like to point out there are a few websites that also provide some information. We're not endorsing these websites, but we're just putting it out there for our viewing audience to consider as a source of additional information. One is from the Prevent Blindness America group at www.preventblindness.org, the Consumer Product Safety Commission at www.cpsc.gov, and also the Centers for Disease Control at cdc.gov has information on safe toys. One could also research this through the National Library of Medicine. Now, in your practice, do you have any handouts or information for families, or do you just kind of verbally counsel them on this issue?
Most of it is verbal counseling. I do, along with those fantastic resources you just provided, I also encourage parents to look at healthychildren.org. That is a nice website that has some really great pages specifically on toy safety, and it has general information on toy safety as well as breaking it down based on the child's ages. So those can be very useful for families if they want to provide them to other family members who might be buying their children toys.
Right. And in fact, before we move on to maybe talking about older kids and the fact that, you know, this is a broader subject than just little kids, we did talk about briefly blindness when I was mentioning those groups. Trauma to the eye obviously is a leading cause of blindness. And I know that we often see kids who are playing with slingshots or BB guns or even engaged in sports who don't have much in the way of eye protection. That's always been a real source of concern for me. I used to work in emergency departments, and it just seems to me that we ought to be able to prevent unnecessary eye injuries, particularly in young kids. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. We have, especially this time of year, the saying, you'll shoot your eye out or you'll poke your eye out.
Right.
And so certainly those toys that come with projectiles. So BB guns, you know, the air guns, arrows, darts, those things can be very concerning. Even, you know, there can be little action figures that you press a button and a projectile shoots out. Those can also be really dangerous. So making sure that those have soft tips or suction cups, not hard edges, are some of the more important rules for parents to really watch out for.
Right. You know, one of the things that really amazes me is that I really like to watch professional sports, and I particularly like baseball. And you see infielders with baseball line drives coming at them at 120 miles an hour. They have no eye protection. In fact, the pitchers have no eye protection. I've been told some of that has to do with the possibility of damaging endorsements because you look more handsome without all that stuff on your face. But, you know, I just wonder, do the athletes who compete at a higher level, could they potentially play a positive role by modeling sort of this type of behavior in terms of eye protection, mouth protection, and so forth? I realize that some basketball players, for example, wear mouth guards, but I feel that, you know, maybe the adults could do more to model safety behavior in this respect.
Absolutely. I would argue that you look most handsome when you are practicing the safest precautions and when your face is fully intact, right? So you get hit with a baseball or a hockey puck and suddenly things look very different.
Exactly.
And yes, kids follow our example so much more than they follow our words. So anybody who has children of their own certainly knows this. We can talk till we're blue in the face about what our children should be doing, but really they're going to practice what they see us doing so much more than what we're preaching.
Absolutely. Are there specific toys, without getting into brand names, of course, just in general, that you think maybe are, you know, a particular risk to kids' eyes that they should be aware of, where they might want to wear safety glasses or maybe even not get the toy?
Like I said, the projectile toys are the most dangerous. There are also toys that have lasers, and so there are also regulations on lasers, but not all of the toys are regulated. So making sure if there is a laser on a toy, it's not going to be shined directly into the child's eye is important. In terms of safety glasses and safety goggles, I think of things much more related to sports with that. So as you mentioned, baseball, hockey, if they're doing water sports or skiing sports, making sure they have UV protection. Paintball, really important to have good eye protection with that.
Right, absolutely. And maybe you could sort of enlarge upon that, Dr. Hendriksz, and talking about the visual system, maybe we could talk about some of the electronic screens. I know I came home the other day, my son was playing on one of his games with his friend. They could play across international borders. They love these games, but they are staring at screens. I worry about the visual effects and maybe the cognitive effects, the effect on, you know, exercise if you're inside looking at a screen instead of going out and playing. And I believe you told me off air that your practice is concerned with obesity and diabetes, right? So what do you think about all these screens that are just ubiquitous? Is it a good idea to get your child a gift that involves a screen? Is there like a limit that you think is safe? Are there age issues?
Yeah, absolutely. So screens do pose myriad effects as you, or myriad risks as you alluded to. In terms of just their vision, staring at screens can cause eye strain if prolonged, it can certainly lead to eye damage, especially the blue light that we get from our cell phones, from tablets that kids might be staring into. So one of the things that I recommend to help protect against that, along with the other things which I'll mention briefly, is no more than 2 hours a day total of screen time, and making sure for every hour a child spends staring at a screen, they have another hour of a complete break from the screen. So that's going to help their eyes really readjust and help them not to have that eye strain that leads to damage. As you mentioned, when you're staring at a screen and just sitting still, it's taking away from times when you could be using your mind to read, to play games, to interact with other children. It's taking away from time when you could be physically active, getting up and moving your body.
Right. When I go to the gym, everybody is staring at their screens, even while they're exercising. And I'm not doing it, but sometimes I feel like I'm a dinosaur because everyone else is, you know?
Yes.
But that's a good point. And, you know, talking about the neurological system and the brain and so forth, let's talk a little bit about hearing loss. Particularly when you hear amplified sound coming back from earbuds such that you could hear it a few feet away. Some have called this backwash. You know, to me, that's a marker for loud noise that could be causing hearing loss. And that's leaving aside amplified noise that's just in the air in general. I know that once you get above about 80 decibels, you know, the sound of loud traffic, loud vehicles, you start to get hearing loss. I've felt for a long time that the public is really not aware of that sufficiently. Do you have any comments on that with respect to kids and toys?
Certainly. Listening to loud noises for prolonged periods of time can certainly damage the inner ear, particularly damaging the hair cells on the cochlea. If the loud noises last for a short period of time, that damage can be temporary, so it can go away. The children may experience some ringing in the ears, but it should get better over time. If those loud noises occur for a long period of time, that damage can be permanent. One of the ways that I have found to work around that with my own children is I was able to find some kids' headphones, and my children don't like the headphones that go inside the ear. They don't find those comfortable, so they're headphones that sit outside their ear, which are great because it blocks the outside sound, meaning that they don't have to turn their volume up too high. And it actually sets a maximal limit on the amount of volume that can go through the headphones. So I know even if my kids turn the volume up to the maximum on whatever device they're using, their ears are going to be protected because of these headphones.
And it's worth pointing out that these hair cells in the inner ear, they don't grow back. So once you damage your inner ear and you have what we call sensory neural hearing loss or high frequency hearing loss, that cannot be really fixed. It can be treated with hearing aids and we can prevent further damage, but it really can't be fixed. So that's why prevention is so important with respect to hearing loss. And sort of in the same topic, because we're talking about the eyes and the ears, let's talk about helmets. You know, I almost got hit by a kid on a sidewalk on a bike the other day, and this child, well, first of all, probably should have been in a bike lane, but leaving that aside, did not have a helmet. So my first thought actually was, this child is at risk for a head injury. And sadly, I see so many kids without helmets, either on skateboards or bicycles. I feel we're not really doing a good enough job as parents, perhaps as educators and in the medical field, to really get the word out of how important helmets are. Perhaps Dr. Hendriksz, you could comment on that.
Yeah, helmets are incredibly important, especially when kids are moving at faster speeds than they would be if they're just walking or running. So that means on bikes, on skateboards, on roller skates, skiing, snowboarding, all of those times, helmets are so incredibly important. It is, again, one of those places where, as adults, we could model that behavior better. So I often don't see adults wearing helmets. And so I think as adults, if we could wear helmets, that might help reinforce the importance of that to children.
Right. And in fact, I think you brought in a few photographs, this couple cute kids, and I think they're your daughters?
They are.
And maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the points that you've made and how they're illustrated by these. One was your daughter, I believe, shooting a bow and arrow with a suction cup at the end.
Yes, absolutely.
So what's the point of that?
So the suction cup, so that is more in terms of eye safety. So it would be more difficult to damage your eye if it got hit with a suction cup rather than something that was hard or pointy at the end. The other thing I'll say really quickly about weapons is you'll see with my kids' bow and arrow, it is very brightly colored. It's very clearly not a weapon. Oftentimes if kids do want weapons, toy weapons, they want the ones that look the most realistic, but realistic looking weapons pose other dangers and risks in terms of people assuming that the child has a real weapon. So I do encourage the goofy, very bright colored, clearly not a real weapon if you are going to get those type of toys.
So there's an eye safety lesson there. And also, I believe your daughter, I don't know her name, but she's really cute. The one with the roller skates. She was wearing the rollerblades, but I think there's something missing from her attire.
There is.
Yes.
So my kids are very good, and I think only in the way that a pediatrician's kids probably are. I'm putting on all of their safety gear. And so in that photo, you can see her as she's starting to get things on. So she's sitting on the ground, and she has her wrist guards, and she has her knee guards on. And the thing that's missing is a helmet. And so the next thing that she'd be putting on would be a helmet.
Right. In fact, I've asked what a good helmet is, and I've been told by pediatricians it's whatever helmet the child will wear. You want a proper helmet, but just getting a kid to wear a helmet. And the same with adults. Again, it comes down to modeling behavior. I agree. So if you're just joining us, our guest is Dr. Tami Hendriksz, a pediatrician, and we're talking about toy safety. The holiday season is a time to really contemplate toy safety, no matter what your gift-giving tradition is. And we're trying to focus on that. And we're trying to focus on how to balance enjoying the holidays, whether you're celebrating Christmas or Hanukkah or Kwanzaa or whatever your particular faith is, in such a way that gift giving is enjoyable and fun, but also safe, particularly for kids. So maybe we could close with a few insights into gift selection, keeping health and safety in mind. So I'd like to particularly ask Dr. Hendriksz, Dr. Hendriksz, some of the older gifts that are non-electronic, like the basketballs, the block sets for smaller kids, are they totally out of date, or does anybody still give those gifts?
They are not totally out of date at all. In fact, I think anybody who has a child themselves has probably had the experience of buying some fancy toy for their child, and the child takes the toy out of the box and then plays with the box. So even things as simple as a box can be very entertaining for kids. I think people assume that kids are not going to be excited by things that don't light up or aren't brightly colored, but that's just not the case.
Can you suggest maybe one appropriate gift that would be sort of fairly safe and appropriate for, let us say, a toddler, a elementary age kid, maybe a teenager? What would be an example in general of a gift that would be suitable?
Sure. So for toddlers, I really like gifts that help them with their developmental skills. So those shape sorting gifts, the stackable cups, nice simple instruments that are well made, so like drums, maracas, tambourines. I think all of those can be really fun and really safe for kids. As we move to kids being a little bit older, I like puzzles a lot. I think that those can be a lot of fun, some basic science kits, some construction sets, so once again, building on to their intelligence and cognitive skills. And then finally moving on to adolescents. Adolescents are starting to explore their independence, so getting gifts that really help them with that. So cooking utensils and cookbooks, clothes, maybe some more advanced science kits.
So does a person have to spend a fortune to buy a good gift?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Some of these gifts actually might be less expensive than the technologically more sophisticated gifts with all the problems of the screen exposure and so forth. So maybe there's a lesson there. Well, our time is running short, Dr. Hendriksz. Do you have any closing insights on how we can do a better job educating the public on this? You mentioned modeling behavior as being very important.
Yeah, I actually think that some things have been improving, especially with social media. I see many more consumer reports than I used to, many more parents posting different websites. So I think continuing with those type of activities can really help.
Do you see toy and gift safety perhaps improving in coming years or decades?
I do. I certainly hope so.
Okay. So even though we're wrestling with these issues, there's grounds for optimism.
Yes.
And
always.
also, I guess, we have to be careful because, let's face it, kids will be kids. And, I can tell you my own son, even though we've taken every precaution, he actually broke a total of 7 bones as a kid, just being a roughhousing boy. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, they all healed. I think the key thing is that certain injuries you recover from. Mm-hmm. Like if you break your arm will heal in most cases. It's when you get these injuries that can't be fixed, like an eye injury and so forth, that it really becomes an area of concern. And of course, we're never going to totally eliminate that risk. Mm-hmm. And we don't want to take all the fun out of the holidays. But I think this has been a really informative half hour. And I'd just like to say, as our time runs to an end, that we really can't do much more than scratch the surface on this. Is there research in pediatrics on some of these issues that's ongoing?
Yes, there is continual research, and a lot of it has to do with just monitoring emergency department visits and urgent care visits to see what types of injuries kids are coming in with.
Can you suggest any resources for more information that our viewing audience might wish to check out with respect to toy safety in the holiday season? Again, we're with Dr. Tami Hendriksz, who's a pediatrician at Touro University and an expert on this subject. Any additional resources?
The one that I mentioned earlier is my favorite go-to, healthychildren.org. Their information is incredibly reliable. And like I said, they have not only general information on toy safety, but they also break it down based on ages.
Well, Dr. Tami Hendriksz, I think this has been a really informative half hour. On behalf of Health Focus, I just want to say it's really been an honor and a pleasure to have you here. I think Touro University is really an underappreciated resource in our Vallejo community, and having an expert from Touro to teach us about toy safety is helpful, and it's very timely. So thank you so much.
It's been
and I
my
hope
pleasure.
that you'll come back and visit us again.
Thank you so much.
Remember, here at Health Focus, we focus on your health. Thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again next year, and have a safe and happy holiday season. This is your host, Dr. Scott, saying, have a great day.